in the castle. Well, this is something any one of us could have said. You know, there are some people who are princesses and some guys walk around like they're princes or whatever. And she said all of a sudden, how did you know I played princess in the castle through my whole childhood? Well, this is a very obvious kind of example. But she was being in a certain kind of way, and princess, you know, one unconscious resonating with another. Well, what happens is that if you make this a goal of your therapy, if you master reflective listening, and then you start sitting back and waiting and waiting and waiting, once every 2 or 3 sessions, and if you're really lucky, maybe once in a session, something will come up and out of you that is so congruent with one of these things down here that someone will just make a quantum leap forward in their growth. But it's dangerous stuff, because if you start clearing stuff out down here before it's been cleared out up here, then you are depriving a person of an entire level of structure, an entire level of process that they should be moving through. That's why when people go away for a birth weekend or an anger workshop or whatever, it's like, that is really disastrous. The personality has to unfold one thing at a time for the best possible results. Now, some people can come in and bang, they're right down here, and that's fine. And then I wonder, well, what the hell happened to all this stuff? So the business of unfolding a personality in therapy should work step by step, association by association by association. Let me give you an example. This just popped into my head of the worst kind of therapy, but it looks really, really good. A woman says, in the last few months, I've had a very strange symptom. I find that I can't pick up a mop, and I can't dust or mop. The worst kind of Freudian therapist thinks, ha, there's a penis in here somewhere, okay? And starts moving her in that direction. But if you're doing Rajyogian therapy, and if you're doing resonant listening, you discover that something else might be happening. Can you tell me more about that? Well, yeah, there's something about mops. I don't know what it is. Would you like to lie there and just stay with the feeling that you have when you see a mop? And then slowly but surely, as the feeling intensifies across time, the person starts to sob and sob and sob. And then they tell you, I'm hiding under the table. My mother is mopping. And my father comes in a drunken stupor and beats her up and breaks her arm. Now, if you were to start that woman down the path of some kind of penis thing, if your mind is full of theoretical formulations, what have you done to that client? You have sidetracked them in a most profound and horrendous way. So when I talk about the associative nature, defenses are associative. If someone can't touch a mop, there's some chain of associations in here somewhere that you don't know about. And if you don't use your conscious reflective stuff, and if you don't wait and keep asking for more and for more and for more information, and if you don't let the person stay in the feeling. See, if they stay in this feeling, this denial, the defense in here, the feeling, remember, is stronger than the symbolization, which makes sense when you think about it. This defense collapses, and here we have the sorrow of our childhood. And maybe down here we've got some birth things, I don't know, maybe. But it's got to go one step at a time. In other words, we all want to be powerful. Therapists too. But power is a deadly business. When you combine power and knowledge, and you think you know what's going on with somebody, then you are... Fritz Perls had a really horrendous name for that, which I don't think I'll bring up here, but he really called it something about this. One, two, three. I'll just be a bit careful with it. So, we're talking about resonant listening, unconscious listening. And I say here, the resonant listening and response from the therapist requires emptiness of mind. One must listen with the most profound but enlightened ignorance. When the therapist's mind is full, there's no room for what is gently knocking on the door. Now, with this field of clear listening, we have art. I almost gave up being a therapist about 25 or 30 years ago. It just seemed so boring after you've heard people's stories hundreds of times. But when I stumbled upon this kind of listening, all of a sudden I realized I had opened the door on an entirely new world of process between myself and people who were coming to me. And it was always fresh. Because if you get into this mode, you never know what's going to come up. And it is like a kind of art, so you get a chance to practice your art. And therapy remains fresh, and has remained fresh for me for the most part across these 40 years. Now, there are certain things in this deep therapy that are necessary. Well, there's lots of things, but I've managed to pick out 4 or 5, and then we'll be through with our talk. Your office must be soundproof. It is incredibly hard to scream if you think that you can be heard. It's very difficult to scream, even if you don't think you can be heard. The prohibition in our species of keeping things inside is really huge, and probably has existed right down through the various levels of the animal kingdom. Because what happens to animals that are wounded? They crawl away to heal or die. This business of not wanting to be seen or heard when we're in trouble is really genetically engineered. In my own therapy, it took me months and months and months to even make the tiniest sound. And people all around me were screaming. And I couldn't. And then one night, this is a very moving moment for me. One night, I made some kind of sound. I don't know what it was, like ee or something, I don't know. My therapist was on me like a shot. She said, "That's your sound, Paul. Make it again." And I made it again. She says, "Go on, make it again." And I made it again and again and again. And it took me 6 months to do that. If there had been people listening outside of the therapy room, no, you've got to have a soundproof room. The light should be very low, so you minimize the sensory input. Should be lying down on a comfortable mat and have a play bat to hit with. If you need to hit something, then you've got to have a play bat that you can hit with. So that's the venue. And if you don't have that venue, you cannot do primal therapy. Unless you're in a room or a building where everybody else's clients are screaming, and then one person screams, another screams, and people sort of work off each other in a funny kind of way. But now I want to tell you about something really fascinating. How are we doing? Let's just take a look. Oh my God, it's 10 to 10. I'll try to finish by 10, and then we'll have a question period. Okay, this is really, really interesting. And we all have experienced it. I believe it was in the 1950s that a psychiatrist in England by the name of George Bach, who was a group therapy specialist, noticed that when people are talking, there's a pull to come in and enter the conversation. And he called that valence. And of course, what it is that if someone doesn't have your tree, so to speak, and they're talking, you want to tell them about your tree. You want to tell them how you feel, what you would do, what happened to you. And this pull to enter a client's conversation is difficult at the best of times because therapists are human and they want to come in on the conversation, and you have to learn not to do that. But in this kind of therapy, the power of that valence becomes huge. If you have somebody lying on the floor, and they're groaning and they're writhing and they're twisting and they're just all this stuff, it's hitting your unconscious. And you want to do something really therapeutic. You want to say to them, something like, what's happening for you right now? And bring them out of it. You want to say something to them that will make you feel more comfortable. And that's why, unless you've done this work on yourself, you can't really do it on other people. Because the power of their ambiguity, the power of their non-sense, the power of their feelings and their non-logic triggers every single part of the therapist that wants to create his own tree. So I know one very well-known therapist in this world who regularly says to people, I want you to tell me exactly what's going on now. What the hell is that all about? That's just a way of making yourself comfortable. You have